We meet at a moment when the global order that shaped trade, finance, and development for nearly a century is being openly redrawn. Trade fragmentation, geopolitical conflict, commodity price volatility, and capital that has become more selective and in some cases more political. In that environment, this forum asks the right question. Will emerging markets simply adapt to the new order or help shape it? I'd like to make the case in the next few minutes that Africa's answer must be ownership, not just adaptation. Nigeria's reform journey is a useful lens for what is possible when we own our reforms. So let me tell you briefly about Nigeria's reform journey. When President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, took office, he made a conscious choice. Long-term economic fundamentals over short-term political convenience. The administration inherited an economy weighed down by years of accumulated distortions. Distortions that discouraged investments, weakened productivity, and limited our competitiveness. Postponing reform would have cost us more than confronting it. So over the past 3 years, we have pursued one of the most comprehensive reforms in Nigeria's modern history. From foreign exchange unification, where we eliminated multiple exchange rate windows, restoring transparency and predictability, to trade finance and cross-border transactions, and then the fiscal consolidation, where we removed unsustainable subsidies that drained natural resources, redirecting capital toward infrastructure and social investment. And of course, the tax reform, where we are simplifying a system that had grown needlessly complex, eliminating nuisance taxes, and building a fairer, more competitive fiscal environment. Small businesses now enjoy significant relief and exemptions, and low-income earners are shielded from undue burden of taxation. Manufacturers benefit from expanded input VAT credits and removal of withholding tax on manufacturing activity. VAT has been removed from essential goods and services to protect vulnerable households. And we have established the Office of the Tax Ombud so that taxpayers finally have a credible channel for dispute resolution. These reforms are not simply about collecting more revenue. They're about making Nigeria more competitive, because a competitive economy is what attracts capital at scale. This is evidence, not a promise. I won't ask you to take my word for any of this. Capital has no passports, no tribe, no patriotic loyalty. It responds to evidence, not rhetoric. So here is the evidence. Capital inflows have increased significantly, whether it's FPI to FDI. The capital market is the best performing in the world for 2026 year to date. Real GDP grew 3.89% in the first quarter of this year. In dollar terms, in 2025, the economy grew 11.2%. Non-oil revenue sector, non-oil sector grew by 3.94% in the first quarter of this year. It's proved the economy is diversifying, not just riding on oil. Reserves have crossed $50 billion. Inflation is down meaningfully from its 2024 peak. In March, Our banks completed a 2-year recapitalization exercise, raising a combined $4.65 trillion, that's over $3.5 billion. More than 70% of it from domestic investors alone. In October last year, Nigeria exited the FATF grey list. Every one of these is a fact you can verify, not a claim you have to trust. But stability is the foundation, not the destination. We are mindful that stability is not the finish line. A stable economy can still be a stagnant one if growth is weak. A steady currency can still coexist with low purchasing power if productivity doesn't improve. Every real economic transformation follows a 3-phase journey: stabilization, growth, and shared prosperity. We have done the grueling foundational work of the first phase. Our task now is converting that stability into investment, investment into productivity, productivity into decent jobs into incomes that Nigerian families can actually feel in a tangible way. Because a reform that shows up on national statistics but not on the household dining table hasn't finished its job. That is why, alongside the fiscal work, the federal government expanded cash transfers to 15 million vulnerable households, lifting an estimated 7.5 million Nigerians out of extreme poverty. And just about 2 weeks ago, Mr. President launched NG Cares, Hope, and Solid, over $3 billion initiatives in programs to strengthen primary health care, basic education, and support for displaced communities at the world level for the people who felt reform first and hardest. So let me go back to Africa's resilience, which has to be about ownership and what we have done and continue to do in Nigeria, because we own the reforms. Now, let me widen the lens, because none of this matters in isolation. In 2025, Sub-Saharan Africa grew 4.5%, its fastest pace in over a decade, even as the world around us grew less certain, not more certain. That is not an accident, and it's not a coincidence that it happened during a period of disciplined reform across many of the countries on the continent. Resilience for Africa cannot mean simply absorbing whatever shocks a fracturing global order sends our way. It has to mean building the fundamentals that let us set terms rather than simply take them. Building institutions whose word is worth something, and where regional integration through the African Continental Free Trade Area shows up in custom experience when you do international trade, and not just in communique. And a honest, evidence-led account of our risk, because huge capital has stayed away from this continent, not for lack of returns, but because the story reaching global allocators often exaggerates the investment risk on the continent. So we pay the prejudice premium. So a message to investors, financiers, and business leaders here and those watching us online. Now is not the time to wait for perfect conditions. There are no perfect conditions in economic history. The greatest opportunities of any generation emerge precisely during period of structural transformation, and we are living in one right now.